Wow. What an introduction. Didn't know I was so good. Well, I am glad to be here today with all of you to celebrate fatherhood. One of the first things you need to do, Michael, after you get back, probably at Christmas time, is you need to so indoctrinate your dad on how to sing On Brave Old Army Team that Boomer Sooner will be a thing of the past. My son is a big Sooner fan, and I've never been able to get him, to sing the Army Fight song, but that's all right. Well, I want to talk today mainly to fathers, and I want to just say to you that I believe in today's environment we are experiencing a father crisis. I want to give you a couple statistics today, and then I want to just give you some advice, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I looked at the internet the other night, and in 1998, these are some of the stats from 1998. At that time, 40% of all American children went to bed, 40%, in a home that didn't have a dad. 1998. In 1998, 70% of all juveniles in reform institutions were from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts were from fatherless homes. And 63% of all youth suicide was from fatherless homes. Since my graduation in 1965, SAT scores are down 100, children on welfare is up 300%, teenage homicide up 300%, teenage suicide up 300%, juvenile violent crimes up 400%. In 1960, 5% of all children born in the United States of America were born out of wedlock, 5%. By 1980, that had risen to 18%. By 1998, it was at 32%. And in 2008, 40% of all children born in the United States were born out of wedlock. Dads, there's a crisis in America. I believe the crisis starts with us. Not with our wives, not with the kids that we've abandoned, but with us. So today, what I want to do is just give some advice to dads. Let me tell you, first of all, dads and moms and kids, there is no school for dads. When I became a dad, nobody had ever taught me. I'd gone to West Point, I'd grown up, and the only thing I knew about being a dad was what I saw on Father Knows Best and what I saw in my own dad. And if you came out of a home where your dad wasn't the greatest role model, you didn't have much to go by. And yet the single most important job of any man who fathers a child, the single most important job is to be a dad. It trumps a career. It trumps moving up the ladder. It trumps fame. It trumps fortune. Your most important task is to be a dad. And everything else must come second. I graduated from West Point in 1969. Spent 5 years on active duty, a tour in Vietnam. Came back, and in 1974, I made the decision that I was going to get out of the Army, and I prayed for two things. I asked God, and my wife and I prayed together. We asked God this: God, give us an opportunity to be involved in ministry somehow, not as a pastor or a missionary or something like that, just to be involved in ministry. Number two, give us the opportunity to impact our kids and be around them. I thought that prayer would lead to being able to go to a Little League baseball game or a PTA meeting. I had no idea what that prayer was all about, nor did I have any idea what it was going to be like to raise 4 children. And at that time, when we got out of the Army in '74, we had a child 4 and a child 2. I'm here to tell you that you can make a lot of mistakes as a dad, but when you pray and ask God to do something great in your life, God will give you the grace to be the dad that you never thought you could be. My children and my grandchildren are more a product of God's grace than they are of having a dad who's been in their home or a grandfather who's been around. So if I could give you some advice today, dads, let me just give you a little list of things that I think you need to be aware of. First of all, time. Time is the greatest gift that you can give your children. Fathers, for years, have debated time. They've always come up with this scenario that quality time is what's most important. I'm here to tell you that quality time will never take place unless there's quantity time that's around it. You cannot have quality time without quantity time. Because when you have quantity time, you still have to look for those 1 or 2 times, dads, where you got it right. And there are a lot of times when you didn't. Here's what you have to know. You have to know that there's only so many seconds in a minute, so many minutes in an hour, so many hours in a day, and so many days in a year. And if you have a son who is now heading off to West Point, Clarence, I will tell you that your time is up. You will be a friend and a mentor to him, but you will be less of an influencer as he has now left the nest. All 4 of my children are now happily married, but they're all gone. I now stand as mentor and friend. And I think they still call me Dad, although my son Dan, when I walk in the office, goes kind of like out of cheers. Norm, that's really my first name. I read in a book called Anchorman several years ago, a concept that this gentleman talked about. It's called NASCAR fathering. And if you know anything about the pit stop in NASCAR, they try and get that car in and out in 18 seconds. Change the tires, fill it up with gas, and whatever else they have to do. 18 seconds in the pit stop. Statistically, when that book was written, the average amount of time that a father spent with his children in any given day was 37 seconds. That's called NASCAR fathering. Dad comes home after an intense and competitive day. He roars out of the house to try and lap the field all day. Finally makes a pit stop. He wolfs down dinner. He kisses his kids good night, maybe prays with them or reads them a short story, puts them to bed, and the next day it starts all over again. That's called NASCAR fathering, and it will never work. Because our kids need our time. And they need our love. They need our attention, and they need our prayers. So today, my advice for you is, first of all, make time the #1 priority in your life. If you don't spend time with them, you will miss the boat. Josh McDowell said many, many years ago, I'll never forget reading this. He said this, and I read this at a time when all the parents that we had been talking to, our children were about to become teenagers. And someone told us, when they get to be teenagers, they won't want to be around you. They won't come around you. In fact, when you go off on vacation, they'll want to stay home. And my wife and I made a commitment to each other that we were never going to let that happen in our house. But this is what Josh McDowell said. He said, you spend time with them when they are young, and they will spend time with you when you are old. I'm 60, going to be 64 years old next month. In September, I will fly to California with 17 other people, all family members, 4 children, 4 spouses, and 8 grandchildren. And oh, by the way, Grandpa will find a way to pay. My children have been going on family vacations with me and my wife for 40 years. Don't ever listen to the myth that your kids will leave you as you grow older, or as they become teenagers, or as they go off and become husbands and wives of their own families. We have a responsibility as dads to hold our families together, and we do that by providing them quality time. Here's a checklist that I think you need to run down every single day. #1, here's what they need from you. Dads, they need your approval. Not for what they do, but for who they are. My sons and my daughter, they are Swaims. They were born into the Swaim household by an act of God, and they are mine. And I appreciate them and value them every day for who they are. Not for the mistakes they've made and not for the good things that they've done, but strictly for who they are. If you're a dad in this room and you've got a child at your table, I want you to just look at that child, and I want you to just think this. Appreciate them for who they are. #2, you need to provide them love. Moms provide nurturing, moms provide caring, but dads provide a paternal love that every child needs. It's a love that challenges. It's a love that gives them the opportunity to explore. It's the love that allows them to be who they are. Every single day, dads need to provide your children with love. #3, you need to provide them with blessing. Don't be afraid to bless your children. Carol and I, when our kids first started at Moines Christian so many, many years ago, before they would leave the door, we would bless them. We would pray with them. I will never forget watching them walk out the door, knowing that we wouldn't see them for the rest of the day, but they were blessed. Why? Because we chose to bless them. I remember when my oldest son was about to, he just missed getting into West Point his senior year. And West Point called back and they said, we will give him his appointment next year, and we will put him on scholarship to wherever he wants to go to school, Michael. And he went to Iowa State University. And in the midst of that freshman year at Iowa State University, he was in ROTC, and I think he kind of figured out that he really didn't care for the Army. He had his grandfather been in the Army for 30 years and retired as a colonel. His dad went to West Point and been in the Army and the National Guard. And all of a sudden, here's a young man who's 19 years old, sitting at Iowa State University with the whole career in front of him in the Army and a cakewalk to go to West Point. I could see that he was struggling. And he needed my blessing. He needed to know that he shouldn't go to West Point because his dad went. And he shouldn't go to West Point because he had worked so hard to get that opportunity. And now all of a sudden he thought that maybe the Army was not where he wanted to be. It was okay not to go. That weekend, he wrote his letter of resignation to the ROTC program in Iowa State, but he needed my blessing. You see, I love my son for who he is, not for where he'll go to school or what he'll do. My son went on, stayed at Iowa State, did all these great things at Iowa State. I think, at least I paid for those things. But he needed my blessing. Number 4, we need the dads to give them competency. Competency to fix things. Competency to shoot a basketball. How do they treat their wives? How do they treat their children when they become fathers and mothers? How do they respond to situations? I will never forget. Have you ever taught your daughter or your son how to handle a parking ticket or a speeding ticket? God forbid. Never forget my daughter on the way to Ames, driving with a bunch of her friends. Got a speeding ticket from an airplane. They clocked her. So, as a junior in high school, she thinks, well, this is a piece of cake because someone in her school said, all you do is go to the judge and you plead mercy. And I go, Sarah, I've never heard about pleading mercy. I don't know what that means. She said, well, you just stand in front of the judge and you say, I plead mercy, and they let you off. They don't do anything. I said, Sarah, let's just pay the ticket. I'm trying to teach her how to respond to certain situations. Do you think at some point in her life she may get another, or maybe just a parking ticket? You see, the job of a dad is to teach your children how to respond to all situations. She's bound and determined she's going to the judge. I said, Sarah, you got to drive to Ames to do this. I mean, this was in Story County, not in Polk County. Dad, I'm going to do this. So I said, okay. On the day of, she's about to walk out the door, drive to Ames, and here's Dad saying, you're going to do this on your own, and all of a sudden this incredible amount of guilt came over me. It was kind of like God said to me, you're going to allow your daughter to drive all the way to Ames, go in front of the judge, and say, I plead mercy. How stupid are you? So I said, Sarah, wait a minute, I'm going to drive with you. We went up to Ames, we went into the Story County Courthouse, it's up on the 2nd floor, and they have a glass-enclosed courtroom. And as we walked up, and I'll never forget it, we got to the top of the steps, and inside the glass, they first of all take care of all of the prisoners who have done some serious things, not just speeding or something like that. And they'd all walked in with shackles on their feet and orange jumpsuits. And the shade of my daughter's color went from, a nice pink to as white as these tablecloths that you're sitting in front of you. And I thought, oh my word. I told Sarah, I said, Sarah, you don't have to do this. Sarah, we can just go and pay the fine. She mustered up all the courage she could and tried to hold back the tears, and she said, Dad, I can do this. I said, okay. And so we went in, we sat down, and the judge called her up, and she said, I plead mercy. And of course, the judge didn't understand it. He didn't say, if you go on over to the story kind of turning it, probably reduce it to speeding under 10 and only finding X dollars. And he said, I think that's probably the best bet. And I can tell you that we did that, but it was one of the great mornings that I spent with my daughter. I was teaching her how to respond to a life situation. Next one is we need to teach them matters of belief. You need to be able to walk the talk and not just speak it. They need to see you express your faith in a tangible way every day. If you are speaking to them that you believe in what God can do in their lives, you need to show them what God has done in your life. You need to be able to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And the last one, you need to release them. Having equipped them, we release them. You spent 18 years with them. Those of you that have small children in the audience today, you will find out how fast that 18 years goes. And you release them. And then you continue to come alongside of them. If they get in trouble, you still love them. If they do something wrong, you still come alongside them. You still love them. You continue to be their father all the days of their lives. Let me go back to the prayer that my wife and I had in 1974. God gave us an opportunity to be involved in ministry and then spend time with our kids. It was just about 2 years ago that I was in a position. I was sitting at my desk and I was just kind of pondering different things. And it was like God just rose up on the inside of me and he said, do you remember the prayer? And have you ever had a conversation with God? You know, where you just kind of go, I'm not hearing his voice right now, but I'm just having a conversation with God. I said, God, I remember how we prayed that. And it's kind of like God said, well, how are we doing this adventure? Spending more time with your kids. And I looked around my office at 5 workstations where 3 of my sons make every single work. Every day. I see my 3 oldest sons more today than I ever saw them when they were in high school or college. I eat lunch with them. Most of the time, I'm 8 hours with them. Sometimes I can't get rid of them. And the verse came up from the Bible that says that God will do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think. It's like God is saying, how do we do it? You see, when you can't be a father, God will give you the grace to be a father. If you pray the prayer, God will answer the prayer. I had an incredible opportunity as a dad to not only work with my 3 sons in my office, but to see them excel in things that they do. I'll never forget when my oldest son, Mike, the one who didn't go to West Point, went to Iowa State. I remember him, he worked part-time at the Y on Saturday mornings as a site supervisor for YMCA basketball. Mike came back his senior year, and he was going to go to law school over at Drake University, and he said, Dad, I'm going to go to law school. And I said, well, you know, I helped you with the first degree, but you're going to be the second on your own. I said, we're really busy right now at Swaim appraisal. I said, why don't you just come and work with us for a year? I said, you might find out that you can do other things. I was coaching basketball as a hobby, and I said, you know, maybe you'd like to coach basketball, get in politics. And I said, let's do it for a year. I said, okay. I said, maybe you'll like it. That was the year that he got a middle school coaching position at Moines Christian. That was the year that came to me after the first day of practice and said, Dad, I've got a 7th grader who's a Division I basketball player. And I said, oh, who's that? I said, his name's Sean Sondelek, Dad. I said, I'm going to teach him how to play basketball. And he did. Later on, I went to the University of Iowa and played Division I level. First young man to be able to coach as a Division I basketball player. I'll never forget the night after our first game, because my son became my assistant shortly thereafter. He was my assistant for 13 years. Think about it. I coached my sons in basketball, but think about having your son as your assistant coach. I walked in to the locker room. Never taught him anything about coaching. I just taught him a little bit about basketball. I walked in and he had all this stuff up on a blackboard. He had the defense that we were going to run that night, the offense over here, keys to the game, and all of it was written up there. I had no clue. He said, Dad, you take the offense, and I'm going to talk about the defense, and then I'll turn it over to you, and you can talk about the keys to the game. We won that game that night, and it became a pattern that we used for the next 13 games, next 13 years, and the next 220 games. I only coached one night without my son. One night. And that was the night that he had his first child. You see, dads, when you spend time with them when they're young, they'll spend time with you when you're older. I am a blessed man with all of my children being here in the city, all of them being happily married, all of them allowing my wife and I to see our grandkids every single day. Did I make mistakes along the way, Dads? Yes, I did. But God's grace was enough. Let me close with a poem that I read. It was written by Edgar Guest. And I believe it tells about the legacy that we all have to leave. He said, I must be fit for a child to follow, scorning the places where loose men wallow. Knowing how much they shall learn from me, I must be fair as I have them be. I must come home to them day by day, clean as the morning I went away. I must be fit for a child's glad greeting. Their eyes are those that show there's no cheating. He must behold me in every test, not at my worst, but my very best. He must be proud when my life is done, to have men know that he is my son. Carol and I just came back from Washington, D.C. Monday night. We took our two oldest granddaughters. For me, the highlight of the trip was going out to Arlington National Cemetery, where both my parents are buried. I buried my dad about 16 years ago, my mom 18 months later. They met in the Army, both of them, back in Italy in World War II. And to be able to take our two granddaughters and show them the start of the legacy that has been built into my life was really one of the highlights of that trip. I watched my two granddaughters who never got to meet their great-grandpa and grandma pull leaves off the trees, put them around the graves. It's a legacy that my dad left to me, a legacy that I hope to leave to my children. And I hope my children will leave it to their children. And we will affect, we, the Swaim family, the city of Des Moines,